Why does God always seem to vote the same way you do? Why does he support your wars, your culture, and your political party? Why does he conveniently hate all the same people you already can't stand? Think about it. It's a strange coincidence, right? God's views on marriage, money, and morality just happen to line up perfectly with yours. And not just the big stuff. He agrees on the fine details. He somehow shares your exact taste, your upbringing, and your tribal loyalties. No matter who you ask, from the progressive activist who believes God is a revolutionary demanding social justice, to the conservative nationalist who is convinced God blessed their country above all others, God is always, conveniently, on their side. Somehow, this all-knowing, cosmic being just happens to see the world exactly the way you do. There's a reason for this, and it has nothing to do with divine revelation. It has everything to do with us. It's not a mystery, it's psychology. So it makes you wonder, are people really being guided by a divine being, or are they just talking to themselves in a holy echo chamber? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on why God always agrees with you. So, what's actually going on here? How does every God for every person end up being a perfect reflection of them? The reason is surprisingly simple, and it has nothing to do with God and everything to do with us. The answer is a neat little trick our brains play on us called psychological projection. It sounds fancy, but it's not. All it means is that we have a natural tendency to take our own feelings, our own desires, our own biases, and subconsciously assign them to someone else. Or in this case, to something else. Basically, humans create gods in their own image, not the other way around. We have this deep-seated need for our beliefs to feel important, to be right, to have some kind of cosmic weight. So we invent a divine being who just so happens to validate everything we already think. It's like looking in a mirror, seeing your own face, and being genuinely surprised that the person looking back agrees with you on everything. What people call faith is often just a reflection of their own personality. What they call divine truth is just the echo of their own voice bouncing back at them from a religious framework they were probably handed as a kid. So when someone says, God wants me to do this, or God's will is for that to happen, what they're usually saying is, I want this, or my gut feeling is that this should happen. They've just outsourced the authority for their own instincts to an invisible, unquestionable source. It's not a divine communication channel. It's a feedback loop. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Okay, so we're just projecting our own ideas onto a divine blank slate. Simple enough. But, and this is the really tricky part, if it's that obvious, why don't people realize they're doing it? Why does it feel so profound and so real to them? And let's be clear, most people aren't consciously making this stuff up. They aren't sitting in a room cynically inventing a god to justify their politics. They genuinely and sincerely believe that their views are divinely inspired. And that right there is what makes this whole phenomenon so powerful. It's the illusion of objectivity. This process isn't happening on the surface. It's happening deep down, unconsciously. You aren't aware that you're shaping your God to match your personality. It feels like you're discovering something, not inventing it. And that feeling is incredibly potent. It takes your personal opinion, say your thoughts on how your neighbor should live their life, and it elevates it. It's no longer just your preference. It's not just your moral instinct. It's a universal, eternal, and sacred truth. It has cosmic weight. It turns, I don't like that, into God forbids that. It turns, I think this is the right way to live, into this is God's plan. Once your personal worldview gets that divine stamp of approval, it becomes almost impossible to question. Because questioning it doesn't just mean you might be wrong. It means you might be going against the creator of the universe. And who wants to do that? Okay, so we've got a theory. People unconsciously project their own values onto God. It's a nice idea, but is it true? Therefore, if this theory is correct, we should be able to see the evidence in the historical record. We should be able to look back through time and watch God's personality and morality change right along with ours. So let's put it to the test. Let's take a big one, slavery. For thousands of years, the God of the Abrahamic religions was, let's be real, totally fine with slavery. The holy books don't condemn it. They regulate it. They give rules on how to buy people, how to treat them, and how to pass them on as inheritance like you would a goat or a chair. And for centuries, believers followed that lead. Religious leaders and entire denominations built their theology around the idea that slavery was part of God's divine plan. They pointed to chapter and verse to justify owning another human being. It was holy. It was righteous. Then humanity started to evolve. People began to realize through secular reasoning and a growing sense of empathy that owning another person was a monstrous evil. And what happened? Suddenly, people started rereading those same holy books and discovering that God was against slavery all along. The verses that once justified it were now taken out of context or were metaphors. The same religion that endorsed slavery for centuries was now rebranded as a force for abolition. So what changed here? Did this all-powerful, all-knowing being have a sudden moral epiphany in the 19th century? Or did humans just get more civilized and have to drag their God, kicking and screaming, into a more enlightened age? And it's not just slavery, it's a clear pattern. The place of women in society, the acceptance of scientific facts like the earth revolving around the sun, interracial marriage, LGBTQ rights. Every single time, society moves forward first, and the interpretation of God's will reluctantly follows, always a few decades or centuries behind. God's morality doesn't seem to lead humanity, it reflects it. What was once a divine command becomes an uncomfortable artifact that needs to be explained away. Now, it's easy to look back at history and see the pattern. It's obvious to us today that using a holy book to justify slavery was just people projecting their own cultural biases. Hindsight is 20/20. But, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, we don't have to look back centuries to see this exact same thing in action. It's happening right now, today, probably on your own social media feed. Just turn on the news. In one church, God is a hardcore capitalist who blesses the free market and believes wealth is a sign of his favor. In another church, just down the street, God is a revolutionary socialist who demands that we tear down systems of oppression and redistribute wealth to the poor. In one country, God is a nationalist who picked their nation to be a shining city on a hill. In another, he's a globalist who wants to erase all borders. In some places, he's a pacifist. In others, he's riding shotgun with the troops. It's the same God, but he has a completely different economic and foreign policy agenda depending on who you ask. How does that work? Well, this isn't just a hunch. This has actually been studied. A team of psychologists led by Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago did this fascinating series of experiments. They'd ask religious believers what they thought God's opinion was on a controversial topic, like war or social welfare. Unsurprisingly, God's opinion almost always matched their own. But here's the kicker. The researchers would then present the person with a persuasive essay or new information that challenged their own view. And often, the person would change their mind. But when they were asked again what God thought, something amazing happened. They reported that God had changed his mind too, right along with them. Think about that. God's opinion didn't lead them to a new conclusion. Their own change in opinion caused God's opinion to change. The divine morality wasn't the anchor. It was the caboose. That tells you everything you need to know. The God that bends with your political party, the God whose morality shifts the moment you read a convincing article, that's not a timeless, objective source of truth. That's just you talking to yourself and putting the word divine in front of it. So everyone's got their own personal God, custom built to match their politics and personality. A Republican God, a Democrat God, a God who loves capitalism, a God who hates it. Okay, so what? Who cares if people are just using religion to make themselves feel better? Therefore, we have to ask the critical question. What happens when all these different contradictory gods have to live on the same planet? This is where it stops being a quirky psychological habit and becomes genuinely dangerous. Because when you believe your personal worldview is fused with divine, absolute truth, you completely short-circuit your own brain. Think about it. Suddenly, a simple disagreement is no longer just a disagreement. Someone who challenges your opinion isn't just mistaken, they are sinful. They're an enemy of God. A new idea that contradicts your beliefs isn't just uncomfortable, it is heresy. A political debate isn't about finding the best policy anymore. It's a holy war between the righteous and the wicked. This is how you turn bias into conviction, and conviction into dangerous dogma. It completely shuts down critical thinking. Why would you listen to someone else's point of view when you already know they're on the side of evil? Why would you question yourself when you believe your thoughts are sacred? You don't. You just double down. This isn't just a theory. This has real-world consequences. This is how you get laws passed that restrict basic freedoms because one group's projected God disapproves of another group's existence. This is how you get centuries of scientific progress blocked. This is how you get holy wars, where two armies march into battle, both praying to the exact same God for victory. That isn't divine clarity. That's collective self-delusion with a body count. It's a get-out-of-jail-free card for your own intolerance, because you can always just say, God told me to. So when it's all said and done, where does that leave us? We started with a simple, almost funny observation. God always seems to agree with the person you're talking to. We saw how that's a classic case of psychological projection, our brains creating a divine mirror for our own beliefs. We looked at the hard evidence from history, watching divine morality bend and twist to keep up with human progress. And we saw how that same mechanism is playing out right now in our politics and our own lives. The conclusion then is pretty hard to avoid. If the God you believe in always agrees with you, always makes you feel justified, and never ever forces you to rethink your core beliefs, then what you're worshiping isn't some grand cosmic being. You're worshiping your own ego, dressed up in divine robes. And while that might feel validating and comforting, it's an intellectual dead end. It keeps you from growing. It keeps you from being challenged. It keeps you safe inside an echo chamber where the only voice you hear is your own, just bouncing back with a little extra authority. This isn't a call to abandon your beliefs tomorrow. It's an invitation to be honest with yourself. It's a call to value intellectual courage over the comfort of certainty. True growth, whether you're a believer or an atheist or anything in between, doesn't come from an echo. It comes from daring to ask one of the hardest and most important questions there is. What if I'm wrong? That's the question that sparks curiosity, builds empathy, and pushes humanity forward. And that's a question a God made in your own image will never, ever let you ask.